Ruebner, National Advocacy Director for the U.S. campaign to end the Israeli occupation. What I'd like to do in the next few minutes is talk to you about a very crucial policy issue related to the U.S. stance towards Israel-Palestine, which is U.S. military aid to Israel. So in the few minutes that we have, I want to talk about why we challenge military aid to Israel, give you a little bit of information about it in terms of facts and figures, walk you through some of the laws that are supposed to govern how we as a country provide weapons to other countries. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing to organize to challenge this policy and to change it and how you can get involved with it. And I'll show you some resources that we have for that. So why do we challenge U.S. military aid to Israel? Over the last 10 years, in the decade of the 2000s, the United States taxpayer-funded money transferred more than 670 million weapons to Israel. It ranged from everything from bullets all the way up to F-16s, Apache helicopter gunships, naval attack ships. Literally, it would be impossible for the Israeli military to engage in any action without deploying some forms of U.S. weapons. Now, in the course of Israel's illegal military occupation of the Palestinian West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip, an occupation that has now lasted for 44 years and has no signs of ending. Just in the last 10 years, in the same amount of time that we've transferred the 670 million weapons to Israel, Israel has killed more than 3,000 innocent Palestinian civilians, some of whom were participating in nonviolent demonstrations like this one, people who are organizing for their freedom, for their self-determination, from their right to live free from military occupation, and others who were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, more than 3,000 people were killed who took no part in fighting, and oftentimes they were killed with these same weapons that we as taxpayers provide. So number one reason why we challenge U.S. military aid to Israel is because of the human rights implications that it has. Because our weapons are directly complicit that we're funding in Israel's human rights violations against Palestinians. Number two, U.S. military aid to Israel comes at a cost. As we all know, a budget is a moral document. A budget is a statement of what we value and what we consider to be our priorities. And I'll go through some numbers with you, but suffice it to say for now that for every weapon, as Eisenhower said, for every weapon that we create, that's one less school that gets built. And so we'll look at some of the economic trade-offs that are involved in this policy. But our government, instead of funding another country to oppress other people, should be taking that same money and using it on unmet needs here at home. And then finally, we challenge U.S. military aid to Israel because we like to believe that we're a country that promotes democracy, freedom, and human rights abroad. And when we see what these weapons do to the Palestinian people, our self-image of promoting human rights around the globe is really called into question.
Break it down in personal, individual stories that many of us could really relate to about how landowners are separated from returning to their lands and water rights are totally restricted or cut off.
Yeah, that's a great question. There are any number of thousands of stories that I could tell, but I'll give you one. For example, there's a village in the Palestinian West Bank. It's called Bilain. And in this village, Israel is building its apartheid wall and cutting off farmers in this village from their land and preventing the farmers from accessing their land and denying them of their livelihoods. Now, for many years, the villagers in Bilain have organized a weekly nonviolent protest against this wall, against Israel's military occupation of their land. These protests are often ruthlessly suppressed, and in fact, the same type of injury that we saw in Scotland that the Israeli military does on a frequent basis. And ironically, it's often the same corporations that are supplying tear gas to U.S. police forces and also to the Israeli military. So in the case of Delayed, there's a family called the Abu Rahman family. They're farmers. They want to farm their land and be left in peace. And they've paid an incredibly steep price for their willingness to stand up to the Israeli military and to protest nonviolently. One brother, Ashraf, was handcuffed, blindfolded, and deliberately shot in the foot by the Israeli military after he was arrested. Another brother, Bassem Abu Rahma, was shot in the chest with a high-velocity tear gas canister and died immediately. Another sister, Jawahir, was killed on January 1st of this year when the Israeli military blanketed the village with this tear gas, and she died of asphyxiation and cardiac arrest. Now the brother who lived, Ashraf, is actually back in Israeli jail now for organizing nonviolent protests. So these are the types of repressive measures that Palestinians face when they nonviolently struggle for their rights that are denied to them by Israel's military occupation. Both Palestinian nonviolent resistance to Israeli occupation and oppression and Israeli repression of that nonviolence movement is something that's widespread. It happens on a daily basis. It doesn't get a lot of coverage in the U.S. media. But for people who are interested in learning more about that, there's a lot of really great Palestinian organizations that are doing this work on a daily basis. There's the Stop the Wall coalition that's organizing to take down this apartheid wall in the West Bank. There are popular mobilization committees all over the West Bank that coordinate nonviolent protests on a weekly basis. And there's a lot of inspiring work. And interestingly enough, a lot of these protests are joined by Israeli peace activists as well, who also find themselves under fire literally from tear gas and rubber bullets and so forth, but not nearly to the same extent that Palestinians have. Let me give you just a little bit of background on some of the numbers. Since 1949, U.S. taxpayers have provided Israel with more than $103 billion in economic and military aid. And the way this works, ever since Israel and Egypt signed a peace treaty in 1979, is that it's been governed by a 10-year, what are called memorandum of understanding. So Israel and the United States sit down and they negotiate a deal where the administration says, this is what we pledge to give you over the next decade. The last time they did this in 2007, the United States agreed to give Israel $30 billion in U.S. taxpayer-funded weapons between now, 2009 actually, and 2018. That's actually an average of a 25% increase over previous levels of U.S. weapons to Israel. And you can see that in this year, President Obama has requested a record-breaking $3.075 billion in weapons to Israel. Yeah, please. The question was, what does the U.S. get in return? I would say very little, actually. But let's be clear that there is one huge beneficiary of this policy, which is the same 1% of the corporations against which we're struggling, that profiteer from war and human rights violations. The Raytheons, the Northrop Grumman's, the Boeings, the General Electrics, the General Dynamics, all of these weapons manufacturers and war profiteers are getting $3 billion in free business every year. So it's definitely a winning situation for them, no doubt. What does Israel provide the United States strategically? It's interesting because if you look at the dictionary of what an alliance is, it's a formal undertaking that's supposed to be mutually beneficial. So if you look, for example, at Turkey's relationship with the United States, you could argue that Turkey is actually a much better ally of the United States than Israel is in the Middle East. Why? Because Turkey's a member of NATO. Turkey opens up its air bases for U.S. operations all across the Middle East. I'm not saying any of these things are a good thing. I'm just saying this is the reality But Israel doesn't provide any of those things to the United States. And in fact, if you look at what our military leaders were saying, like General David Petraeus, who was head of the Central Command, which has responsibility for the Middle East, when he testified in Congress in 2010, he said, it's not a direct quote, but a paraphrase, that U.S. support for Israel foments anti-American sentiment around the world and in the Middle East. Specifically, helps recruit for Al-Qaeda, helps increase war because of this perceived, he said, perceived favoritism for Israel. So, no, we're not getting a lot out of it, especially when the president makes such moderate demands. Stop colonizing Palestinian land. It's supposed to be for a Palestinian state, and Israel refuses to do it. Yeah. The Obama administration actually inked the largest weapons deal in the history of the United States to the Gulf countries about a year ago. It's a weapons package for about $60 billion. The difference is that that's not military aid. Those are sales that those states are paying for. This is taxpayer-funded money that's going to this. Let me go over with you just a few of the laws that are on the books in the United States that are supposed to prevent U.S. weapons from being misused to violate other people's rights. The Foreign Assistance Act says no assistance can be provided to any country that systematically violates another person's or nation's human rights. The Arms Export Control Act says that any U.S. weapons that a foreign country uses can be used only for internal security or for legitimate self-defense. Now, Israel is not internally securing itself by occupying the Palestinian West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza Strip. It's recognized as a foreign military occupation by everyone in the world, including the Israeli Supreme Court, and including the U.S. government. Nor is it being used legitimately, because it's never legitimate under international law to deliberately target civilians, to deliberately destroy their infrastructure, to subject them to draconian and medieval blockades where food and medicine and construction materials are denied to them. And then finally, what's known as the Leahy Law for the Vermont senator prohibits aid to any particular unit of the military that commits a human rights abuse. Now, we have all these good laws on the books. The problem is, as you all know, the political system in Washington is rigged not to actually implement the laws that are on the books, that are supposed to be there, and that I think 99% of the people in this country would agree with, that we shouldn't be arming human rights violators. But the system is rigged so that those who support providing Israel with these weapons and committing these human rights abuses make sure that this appropriation gets done year after year, despite the human rights abuses. So let me take just a few minutes to tell you about what we're doing to organize on a grassroots level to try to change this policy and U.S. support for military aid to Israel. We're organizing all over the country, and we're organizing here today. I have postcards to President Obama that you can sign and you can leave with me. And next time we meet with him, when I'm back in Washington on Monday, when we have our regular weekly coffee, I'll deliver a postcard directly to the President. Oh, do we have some pens? I have one or two.
I've got several pens, yeah.
So we have postcards to the President. We have some flyers about the economic trade-offs that are involved in this policy, which I'll get to in a minute. I'll just pass around this map. It shows that it's a snapshot. It's a snapshot of the different cities in which people are organizing, and we have organizers in more than 900 cities now across the country. So what some of our groups around the country are doing, they're putting up billboards and educating people in their communities. This is from Albuquerque, New Mexico. A group called the Coalition to Stop $30 Billion put up this advertisement that said, "Tell Congress spend our dollars at home, not on the Israeli military." And this is an ad that originally appeared in Chicago. Be on our side, we're on the side of peace and justice. It shows Israelis and Palestinians saying together, end U.S. military aid to Israel. Instead of the money that South Carolinians spend on sending weapons to Israel to oppress the Palestinian people, we could fund more than 2,700 low-income families with affordable housing vouchers each year, or provide green jobs training for more than 3,700 unemployed people to enter the green jobs economy. Yeah, absolutely. Well, on education, there's a program to provide children who are at risk for whatever reason with early reading education programs to help them get a head start. We could be funding 6,600 children every year in South Carolina with the same amount of weapons being sent to Israel. And then finally, most shockingly of all, the same amount of money that goes in weapons to Israel, South Carolinians could afford to provide primary health care services to 180,000 people in the state who lack health care insurance. So it's not that we don't have the money. We have the money to take care of human needs in this country. It's, as you know, the priorities of this country are out of whack. That we spend too much of our discretionary money on fighting wars or on enabling others to fight their wars. So here's South Carolina's statistics. And if you want to sign a postcard, seriously, I will take it back to Washington and we will deliver it to the President, to members of Congress. So let me show you just a few more websites that we have in case you're interested in getting additional details. The first one I talked to you about was Aid to Israel, where you can go and look at this interactive map, see how much your city is providing. It'd be interesting to see how much Columbia is providing. I'm guessing it's at least 10 million over the course of 10 years. But our other website that I want to let you know about is called Weapons to Israel. It documents in detail the 670 million weapons that were transferred to Israel by the United States at our expense over the last 10 years. But more importantly, it shows the human impact that these weapons have. It details the 1,000-some innocent Palestinian civilians who were killed by Israel during the same time period, often with these very same U.S. weapons. So this is just a snapshot from that website. You can go there for a lot of slideshows and graphs and spreadsheets and so forth. And then finally, we have a new one called fundcommunityneeds.org, which is an organizing center hub for people who want to take a resolution to their city council or to their state house and say, we want a resolution saying end military aid to Israel and redirect the money that we spend locally to meet unmet needs in our community. So you can get ideas about how to do that organizing work from that website. So to recap, our three websites, in case you're interested, and I'll share this PowerPoint presentation with David in case any people want this electronically. But if you're interested in learning more, it's aidtoisrael.org, weaponstoisrael.org, or fundcommunityneeds.org. And if you'd like to take some more information to give to your friends, feel free. If you'd like to sign up as an organizer to get a whole packet that we'd like to send to you so that you can go out and reach a lot of people here in the community, please see me, and I'll be happy to sign you up for a packet. And once again, thank you all for being out here. And I think we're at a real turning point thanks to the work that we're all doing in the history of this country. Thank you.
Listen, I think as occupiers, we would be interested in corporations that are, behind some. Can you list any corporations?
Yeah. So we run a number of boycott and divestment campaigns against corporations that are literally profiting from Israel's human rights abuses against Palestinians. For example, Caterpillar. Caterpillar is responsible for demolishing tens of thousands of Palestinian homes, for uprooting hundreds of thousands of Palestinian olive trees. Rachel Corrie was run over by a Caterpillar. Exactly. The U.S. peace activist Rachel Corrie was run over and killed by a Caterpillar bulldozer driven by the Israeli military in March of 2003. And so, there are lots of things that people can do to target these kind of corporations. For example, I just learned this morning that the University of South Carolina has its pension funds
through TIAA-CREF, which is one of the largest pension funds in the country, and there's currently a boycott and divestment campaign to pressure TIAA-CREF to divest its holdings of Caterpillar, of Motorola, which provides all kinds of surveillance equipment for the Israeli military. Veolia is a French multinational corporation that's running apartheid bus lines in the West Bank, where only Jewish settlers can use these buses, and Palestinians whose lands these bus lines run on can't access them. And they're also doing toxic waste dumps from Israeli settlements onto Palestinian land. So there's lots of opportunities to pressure local institutions like the university here and work with faculty to get them to pressure TIAA-CREF to stop investing in corporations like this. Well, thank you all. Thanks for having me here. I really do appreciate your efforts. Feel free to give me any cards you want me to take back to DC. Oh, if I could get these back, that'd be good, because I gotta do this.